grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. But war is not the only horror that stalks humanity's crumbling empire. There are relics older than memory, artifacts that whisper promises of power while drinking deep of the souls who claim them. This is the story of one such relic, the Crown of Veylor, an object so cursed that even its name is spoken in whispers. I am Inquisitor Kaelen Vross of the Ordo Hereticus, and I survived the hunt for the Bloodied Crown. But survival, I learned, is not the same as victory. And in the shadows of the Imperium, even truth can become a burden too heavy to bear. Subscribe now, for you are about to witness the price of ambition, the weight of judgment, and the terrible knowledge that some crowns were never meant to be worn. This is my confession. Before I speak of ash and blood, before I recount the screaming and the fire, you must understand what the crown truly is. Not a relic, not a weapon, something far worse. The myth begins on a world whose name has been expunged from every imperial record, a planet the Administratum calls only Veylor Oblitus, the Forgotten Throne. During the Age of Strife, when humanity's empire first crumbled into old night, a warlord rose on that benighted world. His name has been erased, but his ambition has not. He wished to rule not just his world, but the very stars themselves. In his desperation, he turned to forbidden arts, to the powers that whisper from beyond the veil of reality. He forged a crown from the bones of psychers, quenched it in the blood of saints, and bound it with oaths spoken in languages that should never touch human tongues. The crown granted him absolute authority. Those who looked upon him could not resist his commands. Armies knelt, rivals threw themselves upon their own blades. But power demands payment. The legends say the crown began to weep blood the moment he placed it upon his brow. Slowly at first, a single crimson tear, then more, until blood flowed like a river, pooling at his feet, drowning his throne room in gore. His courtiers watched in horror as their lord aged decades in moments, his flesh withering, his eyes sinking into his skull. He tried to remove it, but the crown had fused to his skull, roots of bone drilling through scalp into brain. When he finally died, it took a dozen men to pry the crown from his corpse, and every man who touched it went mad within a year. The crown was locked away, buried, destroyed, or so the records claim. But relics like the Crown of Veylor do not simply disappear. They wait. They call. They find those whose ambition burns bright enough to hear their whispers. And when I first heard the rumors of its resurfacing, I believed I could control it. I believed I was strong enough, pure enough, faithful enough to resist its corruption. I was wrong. The Vox recording arrived at my sanctum on Scintilla 3 months before the burning of Hive Dravak. It came encrypted with priority codes I hadn't seen activated in a decade. When I pressed play, I heard Father Matthias Krell, a priest I'd worked with years before. A good man, a faithful man. His voice shook with terror. Inquisitor Vross, if you receive this, I am likely already dead. I have found something. Emperor, preserve me. I have found the Crown of Veylor. It is real. It is here, on Hive Dravak, and they are preparing to use it. I have seen the preparations, the sacrifices, the blood rituals in the cathedral's shadow. They speak of a new order, of a king who will unite. A crash, screaming, then closer, desperate. It is here, in this room. The crown. Emperor's mercy, it drinks. It drinks and it. The recording ended with a wet, tearing sound and a scream that seemed eternal. I sat in silence long after, the static hissing like distant voices. Around me, my sanctum's shelves held tomes bound in human skin, weapons that had slain saints and heretics alike. Jars containing preserved remains of things that had once been human. Each was a trophy, a reminder of battles won. But the Crown of Veylor, that was different. I had read the restricted texts. Every Inquisitor of sufficient rank accesses the Libris Malefictus, that catalogue of cursed artifacts. The Crown rated a full entry, marked with 7 seals of prohibition and a warning in High Gothic, Noli tangere, mors certa. Touch not, death is certain. Most Inquisitors would have forwarded this to the Ordo Malleus. But I've never been to most Inquisitors. I had made the Crown my study, my obsession, compiling every fragmentary reference across 100 worlds. If it had resurfaced, I was uniquely positioned to deal with it. Or so I told myself. I spent the next week preparing. Hive Dravak was a factory world on the eastern fringe, where millions labored in promethium refineries and munitions foundries. A world on the edge of heresy, plagued by cult activity. The perfect breeding ground for corruption that would draw an artifact like the Crown. I assembled my retinue carefully. Savra Kaelen, a sanctioned psyker, thin and pale with storm-cloud eyes, gifted at sensing emotional resonance. Jace Kardos, an assassin with mechanical augmentations, is sharp-featured and efficient. Gregor Vasson, an ex-guardsman dishonorably discharged for questioning orders, broad-shouldered and faithful. Together we boarded my frigate and set course for Hive Dravak. The journey took 17 days through the warp. Savra spent most of it in her quarters, claiming she felt something watching us. I dismissed it as typical psycho paranoia during warp travel. Another mistake. We translated into real space and saw the world wrapped in grey-brown smog, its surface hidden beneath pollution. Massive hive cities rose like tumors from the poisoned earth, their spires reaching towards space as if trying to escape. Emperor's Mercy, Gregor whispered, making the Aquila. That's where we're going. That is where duty calls us, I replied, though I shared his revulsion. We took a shuttle down through chemical winds and thermal upwellings. Savra remained silent, but I could see her hands trembling, fingers tracing unconscious protective wards. She was afraid. What do you sense? I asked. She turned those storm-grey eyes toward me. Death. Death and crowns and thrones built from broken promises. Inquisitor, we should turn back. Whatever is down there knows we're coming. It wants us to come. All the more reason to proceed, I said, with more confidence than I felt. The shuttle touched down on landing pad Epsilon 7. The moment we stepped out, I understood why they called this world a grave. The air felt dead, tasting of rust and promethium and decay. The sky was sickly yellow-grey, and everywhere the sound of machinery, grinding, pounding, never-ending. But beneath that mechanical heartbeat, I heard something else. Voices. Millions of voices layering into a single wordless moan of suffering. Savra collapsed. I caught her, feeling her body seize. Her eyes rolled back, mouth open in a silent scream. I had seen this before, psychic overload. Breathe, I commanded. Savra, focus on my voice. Build your walls. Slowly she came back. Her eyes focused on mine, tears streaming. The throne room. I saw it, burning with blood instead of fire. And you, Inquisitor, sitting on the throne, wearing the crown, screaming and laughing and... Enough, I snapped. It was a vision. The warp plays tricks. But her words had planted a seed of doubt. We descended into the hive proper, following coordinates from Matthias's transmission. The streets were canyons between towering hab blocks, each home to thousands living in conditions worse than prisons. Children with too large eyes begged for scraps. The elderly simply stopped, lying down to die. This was the Imperium. This was what we fought to preserve. The coordinates led to the Cathedral of St. Olanius, a massive structure of blackened stone rising above the surrounding habs. Once magnificent, now a ruin. Windows shattered, carvings defaced, bronze doors hanging open, revealing only darkness. We entered, and the temperature dropped instantly. Our breath misted. The cathedral was vast, designed for thousands, but empty. The shadows fell at wrong angles. The perspective shifted when I looked away. "Warp taint," Savra whispered. "This place has been touched, changed." We advanced deeper, weapons ready. Then we saw them. The murals. Every wall was covered in frescoes depicting imperial history, but defaced, painted over in fresh blood. The new images showed a crown on a throne of skulls, figures kneeling before it, and in each mural's center, a crowned figure whose face was obscured, but whose posture radiated power. "How much blood to paint all this?" Gregor breathed. I didn't answer. I stared at one mural showing the crowned figure standing over a kneeling Inquisitor in armor, bolt pistol raised. The crowned figure's face was mine. "Inquisitor," Jace said sharply. "Company." Shapes moved in the darkness, human shapes shuffling forward with synchronized gait. As they entered our light, I saw pilgrims in tattered robes, heads bowed, hands clasped in prayer. But their prayers were wrong. "Hail the crown," they chanted in perfect unison. "Hail the bloodied king. Hail the throne of flesh. Hail the—" "Disperse," I shouted, "by the authority of the Inquisition." They looked up, every one of them, dozens of faces turning in perfect synchronization, every face weeping blood, crimson tears streaming down cheeks, dripping to the pool on the floor, and they were smiling. "The crown drinks," they said as one. "The crown drinks, and we are its vessel. The king is coming. The throne awaits. The crown drinks and drinks and—" Their heads exploded, all simultaneously, but the headless bodies remained standing, still chanting through throats without mouths. From the ruins of their heads, blood mist rose, coalescing, forming words in the air. "The crown drinks. It drinks. It drinks." And beneath that, in letters that burned into my vision, Kaelen Vross. "The throne awaits." We fled the cathedral. I am not ashamed to admit it. There are times when tactical retreat is the only logical option, and standing in that blood-soaked nightmare while corpses chanted my name was not a battle I could win with bullets alone. We ran through twisting hive streets, Gregor taking point, Jace guarding the rear, Savra supported between them. I brought up the middle, my mind racing faster than my feet. The crown knew my name. Whatever intelligence guided that artifact had been expecting me. That possibility alone should have made me turn around and call in an orbital strike. But I didn't. Because beneath my fear, something else stirred, a whisper so faint I could almost pretend it wasn't there. "The throne awaits." We found shelter in an abandoned hab block 3 kilometers from the cathedral. Gregor secured the entrance while Jace swept for threats. I lowered Savra onto a rusted cot, checking her pulse. Rapid but steady. "Talk to me," I said. "What did you sense?" "Hunger," she whispered. "Such terrible hunger. The crown isn't just an object. Something is alive inside it. Something that feeds on authority, on dominion, on the desire to rule. Every time someone claims it, it drinks their will, their strength, their self, and it grows stronger. Can it be destroyed? Perhaps. But destruction requires touching it, claiming it, and anyone who touches it—" She shuddered. "The infection begins immediately. It shows you visions of what you could be, what you could command. Kings, emperors, gods. The more you resist, the deeper it digs. I paced the cramped apartment. Through the grimy window, the hive sprawled in all directions. Somewhere out there, the Crown waited. For me. Why me? I asked aloud. Because you're exactly what it wants, Savra said softly. An Inquisitor. Someone with authority written into their very being. Someone who believes they can master anything, control anything. Your pride isn't a flaw, Kaelen. It's your defining trait. And the Crown feeds on pride. I wanted to argue. But she was right. I had spent my career believing I was special, that I could succeed where others failed. That belief had made me effective. It had also made me vulnerable. Then we need help, I said finally. Over the next 3 days, I assembled the rest of my retinue. Interrogator Danforth Vex arrived with dark circles under his eyes and a haunted expression. Something is very wrong in this world, he reported. I've been investigating cult activity in the lower hives. Every cult, every heretical sect, every pocket of resistance, they're all connected, all working toward the same goal, preparing for the arrival of something they call the Red King. The Crown of Veylor, I said. It's real. And it's here. His face went pale. Then we need to evacuate, call in the guard, quarantine. No. If we show our hand too early, the cult will hide. We need to locate it first, understand their plan, then strike. It was a rationalization. The truth was, I wanted to face the Crown myself, to prove I could resist it. Sister Verity of the Order of the Bloody Rose came next, a tall warrior nun in red and black armor, her faith burning bright. Finally, tech priest Zeta 9, more machine than man, his Vox synthesizer emotionless. The artifact exhibits characteristics consistent with archaeotech corrupted by prolonged warp exposure. Recommendation: immediate atomization. Noted, I said. But first we find it. With 8 of us assembled, I felt confident. We spent another day gathering intelligence, interrogating witnesses, following the trail of bodies marking the Crown's passage. Because there were bodies. So many bodies. In St. Mercy, a merchant selling fragments of a holy relic was found dead with 17 customers, their foreheads carved with crown shapes. In Russ Quarter, an overseer claiming authority of the old kings was crucified on his assembly line, workers standing silent around his corpse, blood dripping from their eyes. In the nobleman's quarter, 3 aristocrats competing for council seats were discovered in a sealed chamber wearing crowns made of their own finger bones, their skulls fused together. The pattern was clear. The crown or fragments of it were spreading through the hive like plague. Everyone who touched it died, but not before infecting others. How many fragments? I asked Zeta 9. Between 73 and 137 discrete pieces. However, the crown is attempting to reconstitute itself. The fragments call to each other. They will reunite, given time. And when they do, catastrophic reality breakdown, the crown will reshape local space-time. This entire hive will become a throne room for whatever entity claims it. And given the crown's attraction to authority figures, you are in significant danger. We trace the fragments to their source, the cathedral's crypts, where Father Matthias had discovered a sealed vault dating to the age of apostasy. Whatever he found there killed him and unleashed the crown, which meant we needed to descend into those crypts. The prospect filled me with primal dread. Not rational fear, but the kind a prey animal feels when the hunter has its scent. We made preparations as night fell. Sister Verity led prayers. Gregor cleaned his Lazarifal. Jace sat in silence, and Savra wouldn't stop staring at me. What? I finally asked. The crown is calling to you, she said quietly. I can feel it. Every moment we're in this world, the call grows stronger. It wants you, Kaelen. It chose you long before we arrived. Then it will be disappointed. I am an Inquisitor. My will is iron. My faith is absolute. No relic can break me." She smiled sadly. "That's exactly what it wants you to believe." We moved out at midnight, flowing through the Hive's streets like shadows. The cathedral loomed ahead, darker than the surrounding darkness. As we approached, I saw the blood murals had multiplied, covering not just the cathedral but surrounding structures. In every mural the same image, a crowned figure on a throne. And in every image the figure's face was clearer, more recognizably mine. We entered the empty cathedral. The corpses from our previous visit were gone, leaving only dark stains. In the silence, I heard breathing coming from deep below. "The crypts," I said. "This way." We found the entrance behind the altar, stone stairs descending into absolute blackness. Sister Verity took point, her armor's lumen casting light around us. We descended into a space that felt older, colder, wronger. The crypts were vast, a labyrinth carved from bedrock. Thousands of bodies interred over millennia, their bones crumbling in wall niches. But something had disturbed them. Skeletons lay scattered, arranged in patterns, circles, spirals, and crowns. On the walls, more blood writing, growing frenzied as we descended. "The king is coming. The throne hungers. Drink and be filled." At the bottom of the deepest tunnel we found it. The vault, a massive door of black iron inscribed with wards that made my eyes water. But the door hung open, wards broken, seals shattered. Beyond, a chamber carved from raw stone, walls smooth as glass and cold as death. In the center, a pedestal of human bones. On the pedestal, fragments, dozens of pieces of metal and bone, and something that shifted when I tried to focus on it. The fragments pulsed with dim red light, and I could hear them singing, "Power, authority, dominion, yours, yours, yours." "Is that it?" Sister Verity breathed. "Is that the crown?" "Fragments," I said hoarsely. "The crown is shattered, but it's trying to reform." As if responding, the fragments began to move, slowly, then faster, sliding across the pedestal, fitting together like puzzle pieces. We watched, horrified as the crown took shape, a circlet of bone and metal studded with gems that looked like human eyes, crowned with thorns weeping blood. Savra screamed. She collapsed, seizing, blood running from her nose, ears, and eyes. The crown's reformation was killing her. "Get her out," I shouted. Before anyone could move, the chamber's temperature plummeted. From the shadows, figures emerged, cultists in blood-colored robes, dozens of them, forming a circle around us, cutting off retreat. At their head, a figure in elaborate robes, their face hidden behind a crown-shaped mask. "Inquisitor Vross," the figure said, voiced a wet whisper. "We've been waiting. The crown has been waiting. The throne room burns again, and this time you will sit upon the throne. You will wear the crown. You will be king." "I will see you all burn," I snarled, raising my bolt pistol. The figure laughed. "You already are burning. Can't you feel it? The weight on your brow, the voices in your mind. You've been wearing the crown since you stepped onto this world." And with horror, I realized they were right. I could feel it, a pressure on my skull, a weight that hadn't been there before. I raised my hand to my head, felt something solid and cold and wrong. I was wearing the crown. I had been wearing it this entire time, and I had never noticed. I tore the crown from my head with a scream, throwing it to the floor where it clattered against stone. But even as I released it, I felt its hooks still embedded in my thoughts, barbs of influence that had dug deep. Number. Impossible. I would have known. Would you? The masked cultist tilted their head. The crown doesn't announce itself. It whispers. It suggests. It makes you believe every thought is your own. When did you decide to come to Hive Dravak? When did you choose to descend into these crypts? Or did the crown decide for you? I wanted to deny it, but doubt gnawed at me. How much of the past week had truly been my choice? Inquisitor! Sister Verity's shout snapped me back. We are surrounded. She was right. The cultists had closed the circle, perhaps 50 of them. In our lumen beams, I could see ordinary faces, laborers, merchants, even some wearing Arbite's insignia, all with blood weeping from their eyes, all smiling. Kill them, I commanded. The crypt erupted into violence. Sister Verity's bolter roared, each shot punching through cultist bodies in explosions of gore. Gregor's Lazarifal cut down robbed figures. Jace moved like death itself, blades finding throats with surgical precision. But for every cultist that fell, 2 more emerged from the shadows. They came at us with crude weapons, fighting with hive mind coordination, pressing from all sides, trying to drag us down through numbers. I fired my bolt pistol until it was empty. Each shot was a precise headshot, but it wasn't enough. We were being overwhelmed, pushed back toward the pedestal, where crown fragments pulsed with eager hunger. Then the masked cultist raised their hands, and the attack stopped. Surviving cultists froze in place, waiting, still smiling. Enough, the leader said. The crown does not wish you dead. Not yet. It wishes you crowned. It wishes you enthroned, and it will have what it desires. They reached up and removed their mask, and my blood turned to ice. It was Father Matthias Krell, or what remained of him. His face was a ruin of scar tissue, his eyes replaced by bleeding sockets. But he was alive, impossibly, horribly alive. And on his head, fused to his skull, was a crown of bone and barbed wire, weeping continuous blood. You, I breathed. But the recording was genuine, Matthias said. I did die. The crown killed me. But death is no obstacle to its will. I serve even in death, preparing the way for the true king. He gestured toward me. For you. I will never serve that abomination. You already do. You simply don't know it yet. Before I could respond, Savra screamed again, pure terror that cut through everything. I turned to see her pointing at the vault's walls. The walls were bleeding. Actually bleeding, crimson rivulets running down black stone, pooling on the floor, spreading toward us with unnatural purpose. And in the blood, images formed. Visions. Futures. I saw myself on a throne built from enemy bones, the complete crown upon my head, my retinue kneeling in worship. I saw entire hive cities bowing to my will, armies marching at my command, worlds burning at my word. I saw power, absolute, total, eternal power. And Emperor, help me. I wanted it. The realization struck like a physical blow. Some part of me, buried deep beneath duty and faith, craved the crown's promise. I wanted that weight upon my brow, to command with a word, to reshape reality according to my vision. No, I whispered, but the word felt hollow. Matthias laughed, a sound like tearing flesh. You see it now? The truth. You came believing you could resist, believing you were strong enough, pure enough. But the crown doesn't care about strength or purity. It cares only about desire, and you, Kaelen Vross, desire so very much. The blood on the walls moved faster, forming words in High Gothic. The throne room burns again. We barely escaped alive. Sister Verity covered our retreat with sustained bolter fire, while Gregor dragged Savra back up the stairs. Jace threw smoke grenades, masking our withdrawal. I stumbled after them, mind reeling. Still seeing those visions of power burned into my thoughts. The cultists didn't pursue. They simply stood around the pedestal, watching us flee, bloody smiles never wavering. Matthias's voice followed us. Run, Inquisitor, run far, run fast, but you cannot escape the crown. It has already chosen you. The throne awaits. We burst out of the cathedral gasping for breath. Miraculously, no casualties, some cuts and bruises, nothing serious. It should have been relief. Instead, it felt like mockery. The crown had let us escape. It wanted us alive. Wanted me alive. We made it 3 blocks before Savra regained consciousness. She came back with a gasp, eyes wild, and immediately vomited blood. I held her while she shook. Did you see? She whispered between heaves. Did you see what it showed you? Lies, I said firmly. Warp-tainted visions are meant to corrupt. Were they? She looked up at me, pity in her eyes. Or were they simply showing you what you already wanted? I had no answer. We found shelter in an abandoned administratum building, its records relocated centuries ago. Sister Verity posted guards while Interrogator Vex tended to Savra. I stood alone at a cracked window, staring at the cathedral's spire rising above surrounding structures. Around it, like cancer spreading, I could see other buildings marked with blood writing. The infection was growing. Inquisitor. Vex approached cautiously. We need to discuss our next move. The situation is deteriorating. I've received reports of violence erupting across multiple hive sectors, riots, murders, and mass suicides, all connected to the Crown's influence. Recommendations? Evacuation. Get off world, call in reinforcements. A full chapter of Space Marines, perhaps, or an exterminatus order. This entire world is compromised. It was the logical choice, the safe choice. But I didn't want to make it, because some part of me wanted to stay, wanted to find all the fragments, assemble the crown, claim its power for the Imperium's benefit. Wasn't I strong enough to resist corruption? Wasn't my will sufficient to master it? No, I said quietly. We will stay. We will find Father Matthias, destroy the fragments we can, and prevent the crown from reforming. Vex hesitated. Sir, with respect, that's an order. Interrogator. I turned to face him, and something in my expression made him step back. We stay. He nodded slowly, doubt written on his face, but he obeyed. As he should, as everyone should obey their betters. The thought came so naturally, I almost didn't recognize it as alien. Almost didn't see the crown's influence in that assumption of superiority. Almost. Emperor's mercy. It was still in my head, still whispering. Over the next day, we planned. Tech Priest Zeta 9 tracked the crown fragments' energy signatures, creating a map of their locations. 73 distinct readings, 73 pieces scattered across Hive Primus. We cannot possibly retrieve them all, Zeta 9 stated. Recommended course: identify and secure the 3 largest fragments. They represent 47% of the crown's total mass. Without them, reconstitution becomes significantly more difficult. Where are they? He projected a hololithic map. 3 red points glowed. 1 in the noble quarter, 1 in the manufactorums of the lower hive, 1 in the Arbite's precinct fortress. The nobles, the workers, and the law, Sister Verity observed. The crown spreads through every level of society. Then we hit all 3 simultaneously, I decided. Vex, you take the noble quarter with Jace. Verity, the manufactorums with Gregor. Zeta 9 and I will handle the Arbite's fortress. And me? Savra asked weakly. You rest. You've endured enough psychic trauma. She shook her head stubbornly. No, I'm coming with you. You need someone who can sense the Crown's influence, warn you if it tries to control you again. Again. The word hung like an accusation. Fine, I conceded, but stay behind me. And if I give an order, you obey without question. The look she gave me was strange, sad and knowing and resigned. Of course, Inquisitor. I always obey. We split up at dawn. My team headed toward the Arbite's fortress squat, brutal structure of reinforced ceramite designed to withstand siege. Its walls were scarred with las burns and bullet impacts from 100 years of riots. But something was wrong. The fortress was too quiet. No Vox traffic, no patrols on the walls. The massive gates stood open, revealing only darkness. Trap, Savra whispered. It's obviously a trap. Obviously, I agreed, which is why we're going in through the service entrance. We circled to the fortress's rear, where a smaller gate allowed supply vehicle access. Zeta 9's mechadendrites made short work of the lock. We slipped inside, moving through corridors that should have been full of Arbites, but were empty as tombs. Then we found the first body. An Arbite's judge, in full armor, slumped against a wall. His helm had been removed, and carved into his forehead was a crown symbol. His face was locked in religious ecstasy. Blood dried around his mouth, where he'd bitten through his own tongue. We found more as we progressed. Dozens of Arbites, all dead, all marked with crown symbols, all smiling. The fortress had become a charnel house. Where is it? I muttered. The fragment where? Above, Zeta 9 stated. Top level, the commander's sanctum. We climbed, passing more bodies, more crown marks. The fortress felt less like a building and more like a throat, swallowing us deeper. And all the while, I felt that weight on my brow growing heavier, that whisper in my mind growing louder. The throne awaits. The crown drinks. Wear me, claim me, rule. We reached the sanctum doors, massive slabs of blessed steel, hanging open like a waiting mouth. Beyond them, a chamber lit by flickering lumen strips, and in the center, kneeling before an altar improvised from stacked bodies, was Arbite's commander, Dravus Kaen, or what remained of him. He wore a crown of razor wire and broken bones, so tightly wound around his skull that his scalp had split, blood running in rivers down his face. His armor was painted with symbols I recognized from forbidden texts, marks of dominion, of authority perverted into tyranny. He looked up as we entered, and his smile was the most terrible thing I'd ever seen. Inquisitor Vross, he said, voice a bubbling rasp. Welcome. I've been holding this fragment for you. The crown said you would come. It said you would take your place among us. He stood slowly, reverently lifting something from the altar. A piece of the crown, larger than the others, perhaps a third of the whole artifact. It pulsed with light, and I could hear it singing, promising everything I'd ever wanted. An emperor, forgive me. I reached for it. Savra saved my life. She threw herself between me and the crown fragment, her body intercepting my reaching hand. The moment our skin made contact, she screamed, pure psychic agony that made my ears bleed. But it broke the crown's spell, snapped me back to reality, made me see what I'd almost done. I stumbled backward, raising my bolt pistol, firing 3 shots into Commander Kane's chest. The mass-reactive rounds detonated inside his torso, tearing him apart in a spray of gore. But impossibly, horribly, he remained standing, his upper body separated from legs but still animate, still smiling. You cannot kill what the crown has claimed, he gurgled through a ruined throat. Death is no escape. Death is just another throne. Zeta 9's plasma weapon answered him, a blast of superheated matter that vaporized what remained in a flash of white light. But the crown fragment remained, hovering in the air where Kaelen had held it, spinning slowly, calling to me with wordless hunger. "Destroy it!" I shouted. "Negative," Zeta 9 replied. "Destroying the fragment will cause psychic backlash, high probability of casualties. Then contain it. Use stasis fields, blessed containers, anything." The tech priest deployed a portable stasis generator, and after several tense moments, the crown fragment was trapped in a shimmering field of frozen time. But even through the stasis, I could still feel it. Still hear its whispers promising power, authority, dominion. Savra collapsed again, nose bleeding freely, body seizing. I caught her before she hit the ground, feeling her pulse racing like a frightened animal's. Her eyes opened, pupils blown wide, whites shot through with burst capillaries. "I saw it," she whispered, voice raw. "The crown's memory. Commander Kaelen wasn't the first. There are others. So many others." "How many?" I demanded, though part of me didn't want to know. 17 fragments, 17 pieces scattered across the sector when the original crown was shattered. Her fingers dug into my arm with desperate strength. And they're all calling to each other, trying to reunite. The implications hit me like a physical blow. If the crown fragments were seeking each other out, if they could corrupt anyone who came near them, then we weren't just dealing with isolated incidents of possession. We were facing a sector-wide contagion, a plague of power hunger that could turn any loyal servant of the Imperium into a monster. "We need to get her to medical," I said, lifting Savra carefully. She weighed almost nothing, her body burned hollow by the psychic strain. "Negative," Zeta 9 intoned. "Priority alpha transmission incoming. Authorization codes match inquisitorial command." A hololithic display flickered to life above the tech priest's servo skull. The image that formed made my blood run cold. Inquisitor Malleus himself, his augmetic eye glowing crimson in the dim light of his command throne. "Agent Vex," he said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "You have done well to secure the fragment, but your mission parameters have changed." "Changed how, my lord?" "You are to deliver the fragment and yourself to coordinates Sigma 79 immediately. A task force is being assembled. We have acquired intelligence about the crown's origin, about what it was meant to do." Something in his tone sent warning bells ringing through my mind. "My lord, with respect, the fragment is extremely dangerous. It corrupted Commander Kaelen completely within. Your concerns are noted and dismissed. The fragment will be transported under maximum security protocols. As for you," his augmetic eye seemed to focus directly on me through the hololithic display, "you have proven resistant to the crown's influence. That makes you valuable. Invaluable, in fact." The way he said it, the hunger I heard beneath the words. "Savra needs medical attention," I said carefully. "She nearly died saving me from—" "The psyker will be collected and processed appropriately. Your only concern is following orders, Agent Vex. Unless you have developed reservations about serving the Inquisition. It was a trap, a test. If I objected, I would be marked as potentially compromised, possibly executed on the spot. But if I obeyed blindly, I would be walking into something I didn't understand, delivering a weapon of unimaginable corruption directly into what? What was Malleus planning? "I serve the Emperor and the Inquisition without reservation," I said, the lie tasting like ashes in my mouth. "Transmitting coordinates now." "Excellent." The faintest smile crossed Malleus's face. "One more thing, Agent Vex. Did the fragment speak to you before you resisted it?" Every instinct screamed at me to lie, but Inquisitors could smell deception like blood in water. "Yes, my lord. It offered power, authority, It promised I could. I swallowed hard. It promised I could change things. Fix the corruption I've seen in the Imperium's ranks. It knew exactly what I wanted to hear. And yet you resisted. Remarkable. The smile widened. Perhaps there is hope for humanity after all. Malleus out. The hololithic display died, leaving us in the blood-soaked darkness of the command center. "Sir," Savra whispered, her voice barely audible. "Don't trust him. I saw, in Kane's memories, I saw an Inquisitor, a collector, someone who's been gathering the fragments, trying to..." She convulsed again, harder this time, blood running from her ears now as well as her nose. "Zeta 9, medical kit now," I barked. The tech priest's mechadendrites moved with surprising gentleness, administering stimulants and stabilizers. But I could see in Savra's eyes that the damage went deeper than medicine could reach. The Crown had marked her, just as it had marked me. We were both compromised now, both hunted, in our own ways. "Transport arriving in 15 minutes, Zeta 9 announced. "Recommendation: prepare the fragment for transfer." I looked at the stasis field containing the Crown fragment, watching it spin endlessly in its prison of frozen time. Even now, even contained and cut off from the world, it radiated menace, power, possibility. What would someone like Inquisitor Malleus do with 17 of these fragments? What could they do if reunited into a single crown? Nothing good. Nothing the Emperor would approve of, despite whatever justifications Malleus might offer. I made my decision then, though I knew it would likely cost me everything. "Zeta 9, I said quietly. "How loyal are you to the Mechanicus? To the Omnissiah and the quest for knowledge?" The tech priest's optical sensors focused on me with sudden intensity. "My loyalty is absolute." "Why do you ask?" "Because I think we're about to commit heresy, and I need to know if you'll stand with me." For a long moment, Zeta 9 was silent. Then, "Define heresy, Agent Vex." "Disobeying a direct order from an Inquisitor. Taking the Crown fragment somewhere it's not supposed to go. Probably getting declared excommunicate traitorous in the process." More silence. Then improbably, a burst of binaric cant that almost sounded like laughter. "Your logic is sound," Zeta 9 said. "If Inquisitor Malleus is compromised, delivering the fragment to him would serve the Crown's agenda, not the Imperium's. Therefore, apparent heresy becomes true loyalty. That's insane reasoning. It is Imperial reasoning. How is that different?" Savra coughed, managed a weak smile. "I like them. Can we keep them? If we survive the next few hours." I checked my chronometer. "We have 15 minutes to disappear with an inquisitorial prisoner, a forbidden artifact, and a tech priest whose logic circuits are clearly malfunctioning. Any suggestions?" "There is a Mechanicus listening post in the lower hive," Zeta 9 offered. "Abandoned during the last uprising. If we can reach it before the transport arrives." "Do it. Move." We fled through the blood-soaked corridors of the command center, leaving behind the remains of Commander Kaelen and his corrupted guards. Behind us, the portable stasis generator hummed its warning song, the Crown fragment spinning endlessly within its prison. Ahead lay only uncertainty, betrayal, the very real possibility of execution for treason. But I had looked into the Crown's heart and seen what it promised. Power without limit, authority without accountability, dominion over life and death. I had seen what it had done to Commander Kaelen, and what it would do to anyone who claimed it. Even an Inquisitor, especially an Inquisitor. The trail of crimson led deeper now, not just through blood-stained halls, but through the very soul of the Imperium itself. and I was beginning to suspect that the corruption we hunted went far higher, far deeper than any of us had imagined. The crown wasn't just a weapon, it was a test, and the Imperium was failing. I reached the basement as the countdown hit 30 seconds. The crown fragments had almost completely overcome their stasis fields, vibrating with such intensity that the air around them rippled and warped. I could see them now as they truly were. Not metal or bone, but something else. Something that existed partially in our reality and partially in that place where nightmares are born. They called to me, sang to me, promised me everything, 20 seconds. My hand reached toward the nearest fragment, trembling. Every rational part of my mind screamed at me to stop, to run, to call for orbital bombardment and end this nightmare. But Savra's words echoed. 5 seconds. I had 5 seconds to be a god before becoming a slave. Was it enough? Could I resist long enough to trigger the detonation? Behind me, I heard the sounds of battle intensifying. Matthias's voice rose above the chaos, chanting in languages that made my ears bleed. The cultists were winning. If I didn't act, they would reach the basement, stop the charges, and the crown would reform regardless. 15 seconds. I touched the fragment. Reality shattered. I was no longer in the basement. I stood in a throne room that stretched to infinity in all directions, its walls made of writhing flesh, its floor an ocean of blood that reflected a sky full of screaming faces. And before me, a throne, not carved from bone or metal, but grown from the very substance of ambition itself, pulsing with sickly light. On the throne sat a figure wearing a crown of infinite weight. As I watched, the figure's face shifted, now mine, now the Emperor's, now something else entirely. A composite of every ruler who had ever claimed authority, every tyrant who had ever demanded obedience. "Welcome, Kaelen Vross," the figure said with my voice. "You have finally come home." 10 seconds. In the real world, my hand closed around the fragment. I felt it fuse with my flesh, become part of me, roots of bone and metal drilling into my skull. The pain was exquisite, transcendent, the kind of agony that births new understanding. I saw everything. The entire hive laid out before me like a map, every soul a point of light I could command, every will a thing I could break and reshape. I saw worlds beyond Hive Dravak, systems and sectors and entire segmentums waiting for my authority. I saw the Imperium as it could be, efficient, just, perfect under my absolute rule. An emperor helped me, I wanted it. 5 seconds. "No," I gasped, though my voice sounded distant. "I am Kaelen Vross, Inquisitor of the Holy Ordos, servant of the Emperor. I will not." "You already have," the throne figure replied. "The moment you touched the fragment, you accepted the crown. The moment you imagined yourself worthy of wearing it, you became mine. There is no resistance now, Kaelen, only acceptance." 4 seconds. But the figure was wrong, because in my pride, in my certainty that I could control the crown, I had made one crucial error that now became my salvation. I had never truly wanted power for power's sake. I had wanted it to serve the Imperium, to protect humanity, to enforce the Emperor's will. And that distinction, that thin line between tyranny and service, was enough. 3 seconds. I found the detonator control in my mind, a small thing. A button Zeta 9 had linked to my neural interface. The crown tried to stop me from accessing it, throwing visions of glory and dominion between me and that simple switch. But I pushed through, driven not by strength or faith, but by sheer, stubborn spite. 2 seconds. "You are right," I told the throne figure, and felt the crown's triumph surge through me. I have accepted the crown. I have claimed its power. I smiled, tasting blood, which means it's mine to destroy. 1 second. I triggered the detonation. The explosion in the real world was catastrophic. The plasma charges vaporized the crown fragments in a blast of white fire that tore through the warehouse basement, consuming everything in a sphere of annihilation. But I was no longer in the real world. I was in the throne room, wearing the crown, and when the charges detonated, I felt them destroy not just the physical fragments, but the crown's very essence. The throne room began to collapse. The infinite walls cracked and crumbled. The blood ocean boiled away, and the screaming sky fell like burning rain. The figure on the throne stood, reaching for me, its face a mask of rage and denial. "You fool," it screamed. "You have destroyed yourself along with the crown. We are one now. My death is your death." "I know," I replied calmly. "But better death than corruption. Better annihilation than slavery." And then the throne room exploded into fragments of shattered reality, and I fell into absolute darkness. I woke to find Savra's face hovering above mine, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You're alive!" she gasped. "Emperor's mercy, you're actually alive!" I tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Every nerve in my body screamed protest, and I could feel something missing, some part of myself that had been burned away along with the crown. But I was alive. Against all logic and probability, I had survived. "The fragments," I croaked, "destroyed. All three, plus the dozens of smaller pieces scattered across the hive. The explosion created a psychic shockwave that unmade them, erased them from reality." I looked around. We were no longer in the warehouse. We were in what looked like a medical facility, with clean white walls and the smell of antiseptic. Through a window I could see Hive Dravak's skyline, still wrapped in its shroud of pollution. The cultists collapsed when the crown was destroyed. All of them simultaneously are like puppets with cut strings. Thousands of dead, thousands more in catatonic states. The hive is in chaos, but the infection is contained. It was over. We had won. So why did I feel like I had lost something precious? "The crown showed you things, didn't it?" Savra said quietly, reading my expression. "Showed you what you could have been, what you could have commanded, and part of you wanted it." "Yes," I admitted, because lying to a psyker was pointless. Part of me still wants it. That's how corruption works, Kaelen. It never truly leaves. It just waits, dormant, ready to grow again if given the chance. She squeezed my hand gently. "You resisted this time. But next time, the time after, how many temptations can one man resist before he finally breaks?" I had no answer for that, because she was right. The crown had shown me my deepest desire, and that desire hadn't died with the crown's destruction. It was still there, lurking in my thoughts, whispering that if I had just been stronger, just been better, I could have mastered it, could have worn the crown and remained uncorrupted. It could have reshaped the Imperium according to my vision. The door opened, and Interrogator Vex entered, his face grave. "Inquisitor, I have troubling news. The Arbites have been investigating the aftermath, and they've found evidence. Documents in Commander Kane's sanctum, records of others who sought the crown, including names from the Inquisition itself." My blood ran cold. "What names?" "Inquisitor Hadrian Voth of the Ordo Malleus, Inquisitor Savara Kith of the Ordo Xenos, and Inquisitor Kaelen Vross of the Ordo Hereticus." The room fell silent. Everyone stared at me. "That's impossible," I said, but the words rang hollow. "I never." "The documents date back 3 years," Vex continued relentlessly. Correspondence between Kaelen and someone claiming to be you, discussing the location of the crown fragments, planning their retrieval. Either someone has been impersonating you or he left the accusation unspoken, or I had been corrupted long before I ever came to Hive Dravak. The crown hadn't infected me when I touched the fragment. It had infected me years ago, subtly, slowly, turning me into its agent without my knowledge. I need to see those documents, I said, forcing my voice to remain steady. Now. Vex produced a data slate, his expression carefully neutral, but I could see the doubt in his eyes, the suspicion. He no longer trusted me. Perhaps he never should have. I scrolled through the documents with growing horror. They were written in my hand, bearing my personal seals, using codes only I should know. Letters to Commander Kaelen discussing the crown's history, its fragments, and its power. Plans laid out over the years, slowly maneuvering pieces into position for this moment. But I had no memory of writing them. None at all. This is a forgery, I insisted. Someone with access to my codes, my seals. We considered that possibility, Sister Verity said quietly. But Inquisitor, there are other inconsistencies. Gaps in your reports, unexplained absences, times when you were supposedly in one world, but witnesses place you in another. The room was closing in. My own retinue, people I had fought beside for years, were building a case against me. And the worst part was, I couldn't definitively prove them wrong. The crown's influence was subtle, insidious. What if it had been controlling me for years? What if every decision I thought was mine had actually been its will working through me? What if I was exactly what they feared, a puppet dancing on the crown's strings? There's more, Vex said, and his voice held something close to pity. The other Inquisitors named in the documents, Voth and Kith, were both dead. Voth died 2 years ago investigating a demon cult on Mordia. Kith vanished 18 months ago in the Ghoul Stars. Both deaths were attributed to natural causes at the time. But now... You think I killed them, I said flatly. I think the crown killed them, whether you were aware of it or not. A knock at the door interrupted us. Zeta 9 entered, his mechanical form whirring with agitation. Inquisitor Vross, priority alert. Orbital augers are detecting multiple warp signatures translating into the system. Identification. Inquisitorial vessels. 3 cruisers. Estimated arrival at Hive Dravak in 6 hours. My heart sank. They've come for me. Affirmative. We intercepted Vox traffic. Inquisitor Lord Geerst of the Ordo Hereticus has convened a tribunal. The charges: corruption, heresy, and conspiracy to claim a forbidden artifact. You are to be taken into custody immediately upon your arrival. So this was how it ended, not with glory or victory, but with accusation and judgment. The 6 hours before the tribunal's arrival were the longest of my life. My retinue stayed with me, whether out of loyalty or duty to ensure I didn't flee, I couldn't tell. We didn't speak much. There was nothing left to say. I spent the time reviewing my own memories, trying to find gaps, inconsistencies, and evidence of the crown's influence. But memory is treacherous. The more I examined it, the less certain I became. Had I really chosen to come to Hive Dravak? Or had the crown been calling me for years, slowly, subtly, until the call became impossible to resist? When the inquisitorial ships finally arrived, I was almost relieved. The waiting was worse than whatever judgment they would pronounce. Inquisitor Lord Geerst himself came to collect me, a towering figure in ancient power armor, his face hidden behind a skull-faced helm. He was accompanied by 2 squads of stormtroopers, their hellguns trained on me with professional precision. Inquisitor Kaelen Vross, Geerst's voice boomed through Vox speakers. By the authority of the Ordo Hereticus and the High Lords of Terror, you are hereby placed under arrest pending investigation of charges of heresy and corruption. Surrender your weapons and come peacefully. I unholstered my bolt pistol slowly, placed it on the ground, and stepped away. My retinue watched in silence as the stormtroopers advanced, securing my hands in blessed chains that burned against my skin. "Do you have anything to say in your defense?" Geerst asked. I looked at him, at his faceless helm, and wondered if he had ever been tempted, if he had ever stood before a choice between power and duty and felt the seductive pull of the former. "Only this," I said clearly. "I destroyed the Crown of Veylor, 3 fragments erased from reality, along with dozens of smaller pieces. The hive is saved, the corruption is contained. Whatever judgment you pass on to me, that truth remains." "Truth is what the tribunal decides," Geerst replied. "Not what you claim. Take him." As they led me away, I looked back once. Savra stood at the medical facility's entrance, her face pale, her eyes haunted. She raised one hand in farewell, or perhaps in warning. And in that moment I saw it, a flicker of red light around her head, so brief I almost missed it, the shape of a crown, there and gone like a half-remembered dream, Emperor's mercy. The crown wasn't destroyed, it had simply fragmented further, spreading its infection to those closest to me, to my retinue, to Savra, to all of them. And I was being taken away, unable to warn anyone, unable to stop it. The crown had won after all. The tribunal ship was a floating cathedral, its corridors lined with stained glass windows depicting the Emperor's judgment of the corrupt. I was taken to a cell deep in its bowels, a space barely large enough to stand, walls inscribed with prayers and wards meant to prevent psychic influence. I had been there 3 days when Savra appeared. Not physically, even corrupted, she wouldn't be able to reach me through the ship's security, but psychically projecting her consciousness across the void to stand before me as a ghost, her image flickering like a failing pict screen. "Kaelen," she said, her voice distant and hollow. "You saw it, didn't you? At the end, the crown around my head." "Yes," I replied, too exhausted to lie. "How long?" "Since the explosion. When you destroyed the fragments, they didn't die. They scattered, became microscopic pieces, psychic spores that infected everyone in proximity. Your entire retinue carries them now. We are all the crown's vessels." I slumped against the wall, despair washing over me. Then I failed. Everything I sacrificed, everything I resisted, it was all for nothing. "Not nothing," Savra said gently. "You bought time. The fragments are so small now, so diffuse, that they can't reconstitute on their own. They need a catalyst, a focal point of authority and ambition strong enough to draw them together." Understanding crashed over me like cold water. The tribunal? Yes, Geerst and his fellow Inquisitors, some of the most powerful individuals in the sector, all gathered in one place, all radiating authority. The fragments will be drawn to them like moths to flame, and once enough pieces gather, the crown reforms, and it crowns whoever has the strongest will, the greatest ambition. Exactly. And Kaelen, it won't be you. You've been tested and proven resistant. But Geerst, he's never faced true temptation, never been offered ultimate power and had to choose to refuse it. When the crown reassembles, when it offers him dominion over the Imperium itself, he won't even realize he's saying yes. I gripped the bars of my cell, my mind racing. I have to warn them, have to make them understand the danger. They won't believe you. You're the accused heretic, remember. Anything you say will be dismissed as desperate lies of the corrupt. No, Kaelen, there's only one way to stop this. I already knew what she was going to say, had known from the moment she appeared. I have to claim the crown first, I whispered, before Geerst does. Yes, and this time, you can't destroy it. The fragments have learned that trick. They've evolved and adapted. If you try to destroy the crown again, it will simply scatter and reform elsewhere. The only way to truly end this is to claim it, wear it, and then kill myself while wearing it. Take the crown with me into death. There may be no other way. I laughed bitterly. So, My choices are, let Geist be corrupted and doom the sector, or corrupt myself and commit suicide. Some choice. I'm sorry, Savra said, and she sounded like she meant it. But Kaelen, you have to decide soon. The tribunal convenes tomorrow. The moment they gather in the judgment chamber, the fragments will begin coalescing. You have perhaps an hour once the process starts. How do I even reach the judgment chamber from here? This cell is warded against psychic escape, and the guards would never let me out. Savra's image flickered, her form becoming more transparent. I've arranged something. A distraction. When the alarm sounds, the guards will leave their posts. You'll have 5 minutes to escape. What you do with that time is up to you. Why are you helping me? You're infected by the Crown too. Shouldn't you want it to reform? She smiled sadly. The Crown doesn't want me, Kaelen. I'm useful as a messenger, a tool, but I lack the ambition it craves. I'm helping you because... She paused, and for a moment I saw past the Crown's influence to the woman beneath. Because you're my friend, and because I believe you'll make the right choice when the moment comes. Her image vanished, leaving me alone with my thoughts. The right choice, as if such a thing existed in this nightmare. The alarm sounded 12 hours later, in the dead of the ship's night cycle. Klaxons wailed, red lights flashed, and I heard the guards outside my cell receive urgent Vox commands and sprint away down the corridor. The cell door remained locked, but I had been an Inquisitor for 30 years. I knew every trick, every weakness in standard inquisitorial detention protocols. The locks were mechanical, requiring a physical key, but the hinges were exposed on the inside, a design flaw meant to prevent external tampering, but vulnerable to internal manipulation. I tore a piece of metal from my cot's frame and used it to pry at the hinge pins. It took precious minutes, sweat dripping into my eyes, muscles burning with effort, but finally, the pins came loose, and I was able to lift the door free from its frame. The corridor beyond was empty, lit by emergency lumen strips. I moved quickly, following routes memorized during my transfer to the cell. The tribunal ship followed standard cathedral-class layouts. I had served on vessels like this before. The judgment chamber would be in the ship's upper spire, beneath the primary chapel. I encountered 3 guards on my way, all rushing toward whatever emergency Savra had arranged. I disabled them with precise strikes to pressure points, not lethal, just enough to keep them unconscious for a few hours. I took one's uniform, donning it as a disguise, and appropriated another's las pistol. The judgment chamber's doors were guarded by 2 stormtroopers in full combat gear. No way past them through stealth or subterfuge. I would have to fight. I raised the las pistol, fired twice, and dove behind a pillar as return fire seared the air where I had been standing. The stormtroopers were well trained, advancing with textbook precision, forcing me back with overlapping fields of fire. But I was an Inquisitor. I had survived battles against orcs and heretics and demons. 2 stormtroopers, however skilled, were not going to stop me. I waited until they were close, then rolled out from cover, firing not at them, but at the lumen strips above their heads. The corridor plunged into darkness, and in that moment of blind confusion, I struck. 2 shots, both headshots, both kills. The stormtroopers fell without a sound. I took their hell guns, checked the charge packs, and approached the judgment chamber doors. Beyond those doors, the tribunal awaited. 5 Inquisitors of the Ordo Hereticus gathered to judge me, and somewhere among them, or converging on them, the fragments of the crown were gathering like a storm. I took a breath, said a prayer to the Emperor, and opened the doors. The judgment chamber was vast, a circular space dominated by a raised dais where the 5 Inquisitors sat in their thrones of judgment. Geist in the center, flanked by 2 on each side. They all turned as I entered, weapons already drawing. But I wasn't looking at them. I was looking at the air above their heads where red light flickered and danced like fireflies. Hundreds of tiny fragments, each one barely visible, all drawn by the concentration of authority in this room. As I watched, they began to coalesce, coming together, forming patterns in the air, weaving themselves into a shape I knew too well. The crown was reforming, and it was choosing its king. Geerst stood, his face twisted with rage. "Vross, how did you escape? Guards, seal the chamber and—" He never finished the sentence. The crown descended onto his head like a coronation, settling onto his skull with a sound like breaking bones. His scream of agony became a laugh of triumph, and power radiated from him in visible waves. "Yes," he roared, his voice no longer entirely human. "Yes, at last, the throne, the dominion, mine, all mine." The other Inquisitors tried to flee, but Geerst raised one hand, and they froze, held in place by pure will made manifest. The crown pulsed on his head, growing brighter, more solid, feeding on his ambition and authority. "You were right to fear me, Vross," Geerst said, turning those terrible eyes toward me. "I am everything you could have been, everything you were too weak to claim. Watch now as I ascend. Watch as I become the God Emperor this Imperium deserves." I raised the hell gun, aimed it at his head, and pulled the trigger. The shot vaporized in midair, stopped by a barrier of psychic force. Geerst laughed again, and I felt invisible hands grip my throat, lifting me off the ground. "Did you really think it would be that easy?" he hissed. "The crown has made me invincible. I am judgment. I am law. I am—" I stopped listening, because I had seen something Geerst hadn't noticed in his moment of triumph. The crown on his head was not yet complete. A single piece was missing, a fragment that floated near me, drawn by my proximity, hesitating between two equally powerful sources of ambition. I reached out and grabbed it. The moment my fingers closed around the fragment, everything changed. I was yanked into that throne room again, that infinite space of blood and flesh. But this time, I wasn't alone. Geerst was there too, his form towering and terrible, wearing the nearly complete crown. "You fool," he snarled. "You can't stop me. The crown is mine." "Not yet," I replied, holding up the fragment. "Not while I have this, and I'm not going to let you have it." I pressed the fragment to my own forehead, felt it burn into my skull, felt its roots dig deep, and then I spoke the words I had been dreading since this nightmare began. "I claim the Crown of Veylor. I claim dominion and authority. I claim the throne. 2 kings, 2 crowns, both are incomplete. Both are fighting for supremacy." The throne room erupted into chaos. The battle was not fought with weapons or with flesh. It was a battle of wills, of ambitions clashing like titanic waves, each trying to drown the other in their vision of perfection. Geerst showed me his dream, an imperium of absolute order, where every citizen knew their place, where dissent was impossible, where humanity marched in perfect lockstep toward a future of cold, efficient conquest. A machine empire, soulless but effective, grinding across the galaxy like an unstoppable juggernaut. I showed him my dream, an imperium of justice, where the corrupt were punished and the innocent protected, where power served the people rather than enslaving them, where humanity's spirit remained unbroken, even in the face of endless war. An empire of hope, precarious but alive, fighting not just to survive, but to deserve survival. Neither dream was entirely good, neither was entirely evil, but both required absolute authority to implement, and the crown would only serve one master. "Your vision is weakness," Geerst roared, his form growing larger, more imposing. "Hope is a lie we tell children. The only truth is power, control, domination. Without absolute authority, humanity will tear itself apart. And with it, we become the very monsters we fight," I shot back. "The Imperium is cruel, yes, but it's cruel out of necessity, not nature. We can be better. We must be better." "Must?" he laughed. "Listen to yourself, Vross. Must. You speak of necessity as if you're any different from me. You want to remake the Imperium just as much as I do. The only difference is you're too cowardly to admit the cost." An emperor forgives me, he was right, because as we fought, as our visions clashed and merged and warred for supremacy, I saw the truth about myself. I did want to reshape the Imperium. I always had. Every judgment I passed, every heretic I burned, every world I saved, it was all part of an unconscious plan to prove I was worthy of greater authority, of greater power, of the right to decide how humanity should live. I was exactly what Geist accused me of being. The only difference was that I had convinced myself my ambition was righteous. The crown fed on that realization, growing stronger, sinking its roots deeper. I could feel it now, clear and undeniable, the corruption spreading through my thoughts like poison through water, making everything seem reasonable, making every compromise feel necessary, making the descent into tyranny feel like ascension. Yes, Geist hissed, sensing my weakness. You see it now, don't you? We're the same, Vross. The crown knows it. That's why it can't choose between us. We both want the same thing, just with different excuses. He was winning. I could feel my will eroding, my resistance crumbling. The fragment I had claimed was merging with his crown, drawn by our similarity, by the terrible truth that we were reflections of each other. In minutes, perhaps seconds, the crown would be complete, and whichever of us survived would become something far worse than a tyrant. We would become a god of oppression, wielding absolute authority over an empire that spanned 1,000,000 worlds. Unless... You're right, I said quietly, and meant it. We are the same, both ambitious, both are convinced of our own righteousness, both are willing to sacrifice anything for power, even if we call it duty. Geist smiled in triumph. Finally, acceptance. Now surrender your fragment and let me... But there's one difference between us, I continued. You've never had to face the choice I faced in that basement. You've never had to destroy something you desperately wanted. You've never learned that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is admit you're not strong enough. I looked at the fragment embedded in my skull, felt its hooks in my thoughts, its promises in my blood, and I made my choice. I ripped it out. The pain was beyond description, beyond metaphor, beyond comparison. It felt like tearing out my own soul, ripping away pieces of myself that could never be replaced. But I did it anyway, holding the bloody fragment in my hand, while my vision swam and my thoughts scattered like frightened birds. You fool! Geist screamed, reaching for the fragment. You've doomed us both. Without your peace, mine is incomplete, unstable. It will... The crown on his head began to crack, not physically but conceptually. Fractures spread through its very existence, reality itself rejecting an artifact that could no longer maintain coherence. Geist's form wavered, becoming transparent, and I could see through him to the throne beyond, empty and waiting. No, he howled. I was so close. I would have been perfect. I would have saved them all. That's what they all say, I replied, my voice weak but steady. Every tyrant, every despot, every corrupt leader who convinced themselves that their cruelty was kindness. You would have saved no one, Geist. You would have just created hell and called it paradise. The throne room collapsed around us, but this time I didn't wake in the real world. Instead, I found myself floating in absolute darkness, the fragment still clutched in my hand. And in that darkness, something spoke. Not the crown, not Geist. Something older, something that had been watching this entire time. Interesting, the voice said, and it sounded like every voice I had ever heard, speaking in perfect unison. You rejected the crown. Twice now. Most unusual. Who are you? I demanded, though fear made my words shake. I am the bargain your species made in ages past. The price of ambition, the weight of authority. Humanity desired power, and I provided it. But power always has a cost. The Crown of Veylor is only one of my many gifts. Across your Imperium there are 100 relics like it, each offering authority to those who dare claim them. I felt cold certainty settle over me. You're the source. You created the crown. Created, number. I simply made manifest what already existed in human hearts. The desire to rule. The belief that you alone know what's best. The certainty that if only you had absolute power, you could make everything perfect. The voice seemed amused. I offer nothing that humans don't already want. Then why tell me this? Why reveal yourself? Because you intrigue me, Kaelen Vross. You wanted the crown, desperately, more than almost anyone I have tested, and yet you refused it, not once, but twice. Even when acceptance would have meant survival and refusal meant death, you chose death. Why? I thought about that question in the darkness, still clutching the fragment, still feeling its seduction even now. Why had I refused? Not because I was pure, I had already proven I wasn't. Not because I was strong, I had nearly broken both times. So why? Because, I said slowly, working it out as I spoke, because even if I could wear the crown without being corrupted, even if I could use its power only for good, the act of claiming absolute authority would still be wrong, not because of what I would do with that power, but because no one should have it. Authority exists to serve others, not to elevate ourselves. The moment I forgot that, the moment I believed I deserved to rule, I would have already lost everything that made me worth following. The darkness was silent for a long moment. Fascinating, the voice finally said, and rare. Perhaps 1 in 10,000 who face my gifts understands that truth. Most believe their nobility of purpose justifies their ambition, but you recognize that the ambition itself is the corruption. Does that mean you'll let me go? Laughter echoed through the void, not cruel but not kind either, simply amused. I have no power over you, Inquisitor. I merely offer. Accepting or refusing is always your choice. But know this, the crown is destroyed, yes. Geerst is dead, your duty is fulfilled. But the desire that drew you here, that made you vulnerable to corruption, that remains, it will always remain. And one day, someone will offer you power again, and you will have to choose again. And again, and again. That is the true curse of ambition, not that it corrupts you once, but that it tempts you forever. The darkness began to fade, reality bleeding back in around the edges. But before I returned fully, I asked one last question. Are there others like me? Others who refused? A few. Scattered across your Imperium. Each of them is fighting the same battle you fight, not against external enemies, but against their own desires. Each of them is wondering, as you wonder, how long they can resist before they finally break. And do they break? Some do. Some don't. Some resist for decades, then fail at the last moment. Others succumb immediately to the next temptation. There is no pattern, no prediction, only choice, made again and again, until finally there are no more choices to make. The voice faded, and I woke. I was lying on the judgment chamber floor, surrounded by concerned faces. The other Inquisitors, freed from Geerst's psychic hold, stood over me, weapons drawn but not aimed at them. Savra knelt beside me, her hands pressed against my chest, her psyker abilities working to stabilize my vital signs. "He's alive," she gasped. "Emperor's mercy, he's actually alive." I looked past her to where Geerst had stood. There was nothing there but ash and the lingering smell of burnt ozone. The crown had unmade him, erased him so completely that it was as if he had never existed. "What happened?" one of the Inquisitors demanded, a woman whose name I didn't know, her face pale with shock. "Geerst wore the crown, and then he just vanished. And you were screaming, and there was light, and the crown is destroyed," I said hoarsely. Completely this time, I made sure of it. "By claiming a fragment yourself," another Inquisitor accused. "We saw you take it, saw you press it to your head. You touched the crown, Vross. That makes you as corrupted as Geerst." "Perhaps," I admitted, too exhausted to argue. "But I'm still here, and he isn't. Make of that what you will." They debated my fate for hours while I lay on the floor, too weak to move. Some argued for immediate execution. I had touched the crown. That alone was sufficient evidence of corruption. Others pointed out that I had also destroyed it, saved them all from Geerst's tyranny. A few even suggested I should be commended for my sacrifice. In the end, they reached a compromise that satisfied no one but was acceptable to all. I would be stripped of my rank and authority, placed under observation for 1 year, and if no signs of corruption manifested, I would be quietly reinstated with a new identity and assignment far from the sector. It was a mercy I didn't deserve, but I accepted it anyway, because the alternative was a bolt round to the head. 3 days later, I was confined to a Medicaid facility in the upper spire when the Vox broadcast began. At first it was just static, a low, grinding interference that disrupted communications across the entire hive. Then came the voice, smooth, cultured, utterly mad. "Citizens of Dravak," it said, and I felt ice water flood my veins. "For too long you have suffered under the tyranny of the Imperium. For too long, you have been told your lives are worthless, that your only purpose is to serve and die for distant masters who care nothing for you." I struggled upright despite the restraints binding me to the Medici slab. "Savra, Zeta 9, someone, turn that off." But no one moved. The Medicaid staff, the guards, even Savra, they all stood frozen, listening to the broadcast with expressions of terrible fascination. "I come to you now not as a conqueror, but as a liberator," the voice continued. "I wear the bloodied crown, yes, but I do not hide from it. I do not fear its power. I embrace it, and through me, you too can be free." "No," I whispered. "It's impossible." The crown was destroyed. I felt it shatter, felt every fragment unmake itself. "The Red King rises," the voice proclaimed, and now I heard the ecstasy beneath the madness. "Come to the Cathedral of the Ash Saint at sundown. Come and witness the new age. Come and be reborn." The broadcast ended. For a moment, there was only silence. Then the screaming started, not screams of terror, screams of joy, of rapture. Throughout the Medici facility, throughout the entire hive, millions of voices raised in unison, chanting a name I didn't recognize, but somehow knew had always been waiting to be spoken. "Corveth, Corveth, Corveth." The Red King had a name now, and he was calling his flock. They took me to a penitent's cell on a remote agri-world called Harvest Prime, a place where I could work the fields and contemplate my sins under the watchful eyes of Sister Margot, a sister hospitaller assigned to oversee my rehabilitation. My retinue was disbanded, scattered to different assignments across the Imperium. I was allowed no weapons, no authority, no contact with my former life. I was no one, nothing, a failed Inquisitor who had almost doomed everything he swore to protect. The first months were the hardest. I woke each morning before dawn, worked the fields until my hands bled, then spent my evenings in prayer and meditation. Sister Margot never spoke except to give instruction, but sometimes I caught her watching me with something that might have been sympathy. The work was simple but not easy. Harvest Prime was a breadbasket world, its entire surface devoted to producing grain for the hive worlds of the sector. I learned to operate the massive harvesters, to repair irrigation systems, to read the weather patterns that could mean the difference between abundance and famine for billions of souls. And in that simplicity, I found something I hadn't expected: peace. Not the absence of conflict. My mind still warred with itself every day, still questioned every decision I'd made, still wondered if I was truly free of the Crown's influence. But a different kind of peace. The satisfaction of work well done, the quiet comfort of knowing exactly what was expected of me, the relief of having no authority, no power, no ability to make decisions that would affect the lives of millions. In the evenings, after the day's labor, I would sit outside my small cell and watch the sun set over endless fields of golden grain. The sky on Harvest Prime was clean, unmarred by pollution, and at night the stars shone with a clarity I'd forgotten existed. Each point of light represented a world, a system, a sector full of humanity struggling to survive in a galaxy that wanted them dead. And I was no longer responsible for any of it. The thought should have brought relief. Instead, it brought guilt. Because even after everything, after the crown, after the temptation, after the terrible knowledge of my own corruptibility, Part of me still wanted to be out there, making a difference, wielding authority, shaping the Imperium according to my vision. The ambition never truly left. Just as that voice in the darkness had promised, it remained, dormant but alive, waiting for the next opportunity to grow. 6 months into my penance, Sister Margot finally spoke to me. I was working in the North Fields, repairing a broken harvester, when she approached. "You are healing," she said simply. "Not your body, that healed within weeks, but your soul. I can see it in how you move, how you work. You no longer carry yourself like a man bearing the weight of worlds." "Is that a good thing?" I asked, not looking up from my work. "The Imperium needs people willing to bear that weight." "The Imperium needs people who understand that the weight is too heavy for any one person to carry," she replied. "You learned that lesson. Many never do. They carry that burden until it crushes them, or until they convince themselves they are strong enough to carry it alone. Both paths lead to corruption." I thought about that as I worked, my hands moving automatically through the familiar motions of maintenance. She was right, of course. Geerst had believed he was strong enough, so had I. The Crown had simply shown us what we already believed about ourselves. "Will I ever be allowed to return?" I asked. "To the Inquisition?" "That is not for me to decide, but Kaelen, do you want to return, or do you simply think you should want to?" It was a good question, one I wasn't sure I could answer honestly. The year of my penance passed slowly, measured in harvests and seasons. I learned the names of the other workers in my sector, men and women who had spent their entire lives in these fields, who would die here, who found meaning in the simple act of feeding humanity's endless appetite. They accepted me without question, never asking about my past, content to judge me only by the quality of my work. And slowly, almost without noticing, I became one of them. The scars from the crown faded, though they never truly disappeared. The nightmares became less frequent. The weight on my skull where the fragment had fused became a memory rather than a constant presence. But the temptation remained, always. On the first day of the 13th month, everything changed. I was working in the northern fields when I heard the shuttle engines, military grade by the sound, far too aggressive for normal agri-world traffic. I straightened, shading my eyes against the sun, and watched a black-painted inquisitorial shuttle descend toward the monastery. My first thought was that they had come to execute me after all, that someone had decided even supervised penance was too lenient for an inquisitor who had touched the crown. I considered running briefly, but dismissed the idea. Where would I go? And more importantly, would running prove them right about my corruption? So I walked back to the monastery, covered in honest dirt, and waited. The shuttle had landed in the courtyard, and a figure in inquisitorial armor stood beside it, flanked by stormtroopers. As I approached, the figure removed their helm, and I felt shock run through me. It was Interrogator Danforth Vex, but he wore different insignia now. No longer an interrogator, but a full inquisitor. He had been promoted in my absence. "Kaelen," he greeted me, and his voice held neither warmth nor hostility, simply professional courtesy. "I apologize for interrupting your penance, but circumstances have forced our hand. We need you." "Need me?" I kept my voice carefully neutral. "I have no rank, no authority. I'm less than nothing. The tribunal stripped your formal rank, yes, but you're still an inquisitor in practice. The skills don't vanish just because someone takes away your rosette." He gestured to the shuttle. "We have a situation, one that requires someone with your unique experience." "What situation?" "Another relic has surfaced. Not the crown, something else, something older. We've lost 3 investigation teams already. Every inquisitor we send comes back changed, corrupted, or they don't come back at all." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "We need someone who has faced corruption and resisted, someone who understands the cost of claiming power, someone who has learned to say no." I looked at the shuttle, then back at the fields where I had found a measure of peace. Part of me, the part that had learned humility, that had accepted my limitations, wanted to refuse. I wanted to say I'd earned my rest, that I had done enough, that someone else could bear this burden. But another part, the part that would never truly die, whispered, "This is your chance, your redemption, your opportunity to prove that the crown didn't break you." And I knew with cold certainty that I was going to say yes, because despite everything, despite all the lessons learned and wisdom gained, I was still Kaelen Vross, still an Inquisitor, still someone who believed deep down that I could make a difference, still someone vulnerable to corruption. "Give me 5 minutes to gather my things," I said quietly. The flight to our destination took 3 days through the warp. Vex briefed me during the journey, showing me pick captures and after-action reports from the failed investigation teams. The relic was called the Scepter of Dominion, discovered in the ruins of a pre-imperial civilization on a dead world designated as Mortis Secundus. According to fragmentary records, the scepter granted its wielder the ability to command absolute obedience, not through psychic influence or physical coercion, but through pure authority made manifest. Those who heard the scepter-bearer's commands found themselves unable to disobey their free will, overridden by an imperative they couldn't resist. "Sounds familiar," I muttered, studying the reports. "That's why we need you," Vex said. "You understand how these artifacts work, how they seduce, how they are corrupt. The other Inquisitors who went in believed they were strong enough to resist. You know better." "Do I?" I looked up from the data slate. "Danforth, I claimed the crown. Twice. I felt its power flowing through me and I wanted it. Part of me still wants it. What makes you think I won't succumb to the scepter?" "Because you're asking that question," he replied simply. "The corrupted never question their own strength. They never doubt their righteousness. The fact that you're aware of your vulnerability is what makes you uniquely suited for this mission." It was thin logic, but I had no better argument to offer. We translated into real space above Mortis Secundus, and the sight of the world filled me with immediate dread. It was a corpse world, in the most literal sense, a planet that had died millennia ago, its atmosphere stripped away, its surface scoured by some ancient catastrophe. Massive ruins dotted the landscape, the remains of cities that had once housed billions, but now held only dust and silence. "Where exactly is this scepter?" I asked. "Deep in the planet's core. The previous civilization built their most important structures underground, probably to escape whatever killed them. We've established a base camp at the main entrance, but..." Vex hesitated. "Kaelen, there's something you should know. The last team that went in, they made it back to the surface, but they weren't themselves anymore. They kept insisting that everything was fine, that the mission was a success, that we should all come down and see what they'd found. When we refused, He swallowed hard. "They killed themselves, all of them simultaneously, without hesitation, as if someone had commanded them to die and they simply obeyed." "The scepter is already active," I said quietly. "Someone down there is wielding it, or something." We took a lander down to the surface, accompanied by a full squad of stormtroopers and a tech priest named Sigma 7. The base camp was a cluster of prefab structures surrounding a massive opening in the planet's surface tunnel, wide enough to drive a tank through, descending into absolute darkness. The camp was eerily quiet. Personnel were moved about their duties with mechanical precision, but there was something wrong with their movements, too synchronized, too coordinated, as if they were all following the same unspoken instructions. "When did this start?" I asked Vex quietly. 2 days ago, after the last team's suicide. Everyone who was in the camp at the time has been affected. They're still functional, still following orders, but they're not themselves anymore. Watch their eyes, they never blink in unison." He was right. I observed the camp personnel for several minutes and noticed the pattern, or rather the lack of pattern. They blinked in perfect alternation, like a relay system, ensuring that at least one pair of eyes was always open and watching. as if something needed to maintain constant observation through them. "We need to evacuate this camp," I said firmly. "Everyone here is compromised." "Agreed, but we still need to deal with the scepter. If we leave it, it will only spread further. Eventually, it will reach populated worlds. And then," Vex left the implication unspoken, "then we go in. Small team, moving fast, with orders to destroy the scepter on sight. No attempts to study it, no attempts to secure it. Pure destruction." That was the plan for the last 3 teams too. None of them could bring themselves to destroy it when they found it. The scepter wouldn't let them. I thought about that, remembering the crown, remembering how it had made me believe every decision was my own, even as it guided my choices. These artifacts didn't control people through force. They controlled them through desire, by showing them what they wanted and making that vision inseparable from the artifact's will. "Then we need someone who wants to destroy it more than they want to claim it," I said. "Someone who has faced temptation and knows the cost of succumbing. Someone who I stopped, realization dawning. You brought me here to die, didn't you? This is a suicide mission." Vex met my eyes without flinching. "I brought you here because you're the only person I know who might be able to resist the scepter long enough to destroy it. If that requires your death, then yes, I expect you to die. Because that's what Inquisitors do. We sacrifice ourselves so that others might live. You taught me that." He was right, of course. This was exactly the kind of mission I would have ordered someone else to undertake, back when I had the authority to command. The fact that I was now on the receiving end of such orders felt like justice, or perhaps karma. "Who's coming with me?" I asked. "No one. The scepter's influence grows stronger the more people are present, something about collective will or shared authority. You'll have to go alone. Alone, into the depths of a dead world to face an artifact that could override free will itself, with no backup and no guarantee of success. It was madness. It was also exactly what I deserved. "Give me an hour to prepare," I said. I descended into the darkness alone, carrying only a lasrifle, a handful of frag grenades, and a personal Vox link to the surface. The tunnel was unnaturally smooth, its walls carved from solid rock with a precision that suggested advanced technology rather than manual labor. Emergency lumen strips had been installed by previous teams, casting sickly yellow light that made the shadows seem to move and breathe. The descent took hours. The tunnel spiraled downward in a gentle curve like walking into the gullet of some enormous beast. Every 100 meters I passed markers left by previous teams, chalk marks on the walls, equipment caches, even makeshift shrines where nervous soldiers had prayed to the Emperor for protection. None of those prayers had been answered. At the 2-hour mark, I found the first body, an Inquisitor I didn't recognize, their armor scorched and torn, their face locked in an expression of ecstatic rapture. They had carved words into their own flesh with a combat knife. "I obey, I obey, I obey," repeated across every exposed surface of skin. I forced myself to keep moving. The deeper I descended, the more I felt it, a presence, a weight, similar to the crown but subtly different. Where the crown had whispered promises of power, the scepter sang of order, of perfect harmony, of a world where everyone knew their place and fulfilled their role without question or doubt, a world without conflict, without suffering, without the terrible burden of choice. It was seductive in a way the crown had never been. Because part of me, the part exhausted by years of making impossible decisions, of bearing responsibility for millions of lives, wanted that world desperately. At the 3-hour mark, I heard voices, not through my Vox link, but in my head, clear as if someone stood beside me speaking. "Come, we are waiting. You will understand. You will obey. You will be free." I recognized those voices. The missing Inquisitors, the lost investigation teams, all of them down here in the darkness, waiting, serving the scepter's will. "I'm not here to join you," I muttered aloud, though I knew they could hear my thoughts as clearly as I heard theirs. "I'm here to end this." Laughter echoed through my mind, a dozen voices speaking in perfect unison. End, Number. You misunderstand. This is not an ending, but a beginning. Come, see, judge for yourself. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber carved from the planet's mantle, a space so large my lumen pack couldn't reach the far walls or ceiling. And in the center of that chamber, on a raised dais of black stone, stood the scepter of dominion. It was beautiful. That was the first thought that crossed my mind, and I knew immediately it was the scepter's influence. The artifact was a rod of crystalline metal, perhaps 2 meters long, crowned with a sphere that pulsed with soft blue light. Impossibly complex patterns were etched into its surface, and as I watched, those patterns seemed to move, to flow, forming words and images that almost made sense. Around the dais, the missing teams knelt in perfect circles, their faces upturned toward the scepter, their expressions peaceful, serene. They had found what they were looking for, and standing on the dais, one hand resting on the scepter, was someone I recognized. Inquisitor Sevara Kith of the Ordo Xenos, one of the names from Commander Kane's documents. One of the Inquisitors was supposedly killed by the Crown's influence years ago. She smiled when she saw me, and in that smile, I saw perfect contentment, perfect obedience, perfect slavery. "Kaelen Vross," she said, her voice carrying across the vast chamber without need for amplification. "The scepter has been waiting for you. It knew you would come. It knows everything about you, your doubts, your fears, your terrible burden of authority, and it offers you freedom from all of it." I raised the las rifle, aiming at the scepter. "Step away from it, Sevara. Whatever it's promised you, it's a lie." "A lie?" She laughed gently. "Look around you, Kaelen. Do these people look like they're suffering? Do they look like they've been corrupted? They're happier now than they've ever been. No more doubts, no more guilt, no more agonizing over impossible decisions. They simply obey, and in obedience they find peace. That's not peace. That's slavery." "Is it?" She tilted her head, considering. "What's the difference between slavery and duty? Between obedience and service? You've spent your entire life obeying the Emperor's will. Is that slavery? Or is it freedom from the burden of choice?" I wanted to argue, wanted to explain the difference between willing service and compelled obedience. But the words wouldn't come, because part of me, that traitorous part that had wanted the crown, that still whispered desires for power and authority, saw her logic, agreed with it. "The scepter shows you the truth," Sevara continued, her voice soothing, hypnotic. "Authority is a burden too heavy for any single person to bear. You learned that with the crown. You felt it crushing you, corrupting you. But what if you didn't have to bear it? What if you could simply obey, serve a greater will, and be free of that terrible weight?" "Whose will?" I demanded. "Whose commands does the scepter follow? Does it matter? The commands are just, the orders are necessary, and most importantly, they're not yours to make. You can finally rest, Kaelen. Finally, lay down your authority and let someone else decide. Isn't that what you want?" Emperor help me, it was. Some part of me wanted nothing more than to kneel like those other Inquisitors, to let the scepter take away my will, my choices, my terrible freedom, to never again have to decide who lived and who died, which worlds to save and which to sacrifice. I felt my finger loosening on the las rifle's trigger. I felt my legs beginning to bend, to kneel. Felt the scepter's song filling my mind with promises of order and peace and an end to suffering. And then I remembered something that voice in the darkness had said. Authority exists to serve others, not to elevate ourselves. The scepter wasn't offering to relieve me of the authority's burden. It was offering to make me a slave while pretending that slavery was freedom. It was the same corruption as the crown, just wearing a different mask. Instead of promising power, it promised rest. Instead of seducing through ambition, it seduced through exhaustion. But the end result was the same: the death of free will, the extinction of choice, the transformation of humanity into mindless puppets dancing on another's strings. "No," I said, and raised the las rifle again. Savara's expression didn't change, but the blue light of the scepter pulsed brighter, and suddenly I felt pressure on my mind like a physical weight. A command, simple and absolute. Kneel. My legs buckled, my body began to comply despite my will, muscles moving according to someone else's imperative. I fell to one knee, then the other, the Lazarafal slipping from nerveless fingers. Obey, serve, rest. Peace awaits, freedom awaits, only obey. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, could barely think through the overwhelming pressure of the scepter's will. This was stronger than the crown had been, more absolute. Where the crown had seduced and whispered, the scepter simply commanded, and disobedience was not an option. But then, in the depths of my failing mind, I remembered something else. Something I had learned in that year of penance on Harvest Prime. Authority exists to serve others, but service doesn't require authority, doesn't require power, doesn't require will or choice or freedom. Service only requires action. I couldn't resist the scepter's command. My mind was no longer my own, but my body, my hands, my fingers, those still responded to older imperatives, to muscle memory trained over decades, to instincts carved into flesh through endless repetition. My hand found the frag grenade on my belt, pulled the pin, released the trigger, and threw it at the scepter. The explosion was deafening in the enclosed space. Shrapnel tore through the air and I felt fragments bite into my flesh. But I didn't care about the pain, I only cared about the scepter, about whether the grenade had been enough to destroy it. The blue light flickered, dimmed, and then, with a sound like breaking glass, the scepter shattered. Savara screamed, not in pain or rage, but in loss. The light went out of her eyes, and she collapsed like a puppet with cut strings. Around the chamber, the kneeling inquisitors fell forward, unconscious or dead. I couldn't tell which, and I felt the pressure on my mind vanish, leaving behind only silence and the ringing in my ears from the explosion. I had done it, against all odds, against the scepter's absolute command. I had destroyed it, and I had survived. For now, the journey back to the surface was a blur of pain and exhaustion. I carried Savara's unconscious body over my shoulder, climbing that endless spiral tunnel one agonizing step at a time. Behind me, I could hear the other inquisitors stirring, waking from their trance, their voices calling out in confusion and fear. I didn't stop to help them. I had to reach the surface, had to make my report, had to ensure that every fragment of the scepter was recovered and destroyed before its influence could spread again. When I finally emerged into the wan daylight of Mortis Secundus, I found Vex waiting with a full complement of stormtroopers. They immediately took Savara from me, rushing her to the medical facility, while a medici attended to my wounds. "It's done," I told Vex, my voice hoarse. "The scepter is destroyed. The chamber needs to be sealed, the fragments collected and atomized, and everyone who was in that camp needs to be quarantined and examined for residual influence." "Already being done," Vex replied, looking at me with something that might have been respect. "Kaelen, I wasn't sure you'd make it back. The scepter's pull was so strong, even from up here we could feel it. How did you resist?" "I didn't," I admitted. "Not really. I couldn't disobey its command, but I could still act, and apparently that was enough." Over the next few days, we worked on cleaning up the aftermath. The scepter's fragments were collected, placed in stasis fields, and eventually thrown into the sun to ensure their complete destruction. The affected inquisitors were debriefed, examined by sanctioned psychers, and placed under observation. Most of them would recover, given time. Savara collapsed again, nose bleeding freely, body seizing. I caught her before she hit the ground, feeling her pulse racing like a frightened animal's. Her eyes opened, unfocused, staring through me at something beyond. "So many," she whispered. "So many crowns, so many thrones. The nobles are dead, Kaelen. All of them. They fought over the fragment, killed each other for the privilege of wearing it. And the manufactorums, Emperor's mercy, the workers are building something, building a throne from the bodies of their overseers." "Vex," I voxed urgently. "Verity, report." Static answered me. Then Vex's voice, strained and terrified. Inquisitor, the nobles, they're all Emperor's blood, they're still moving. They're dead, but they're still. The Vox cut off with a scream and bolter fire. Sister Verity responded seconds later, voice tense but controlled. Manufacturum secure, but Inquisitor, you need to see this. What they've built here, it's not just a throne, it's an altar, a place of sacrifice, and there are thousands of workers, all waiting, all marked with crown symbols. Fall back, I commanded. Both teams, return to the rendezvous point. We're leaving this cursed fortress. We fled the Arbite's building, the stasis container secured to Zeta 9's harness. Behind us I could hear movement, bodies stirring, rising, pursuing. The dead Arbites, animated by the Crown's influence, shambling after us with the persistence of the damned. The hive streets were chaos. In the hours we'd been inside, something had changed. The infection had spread beyond containment. Everywhere I looked, crown symbols painted in blood on walls, scratched into metal, carved into flesh. Citizens moved with strange synchronization, all turning to watch us pass, all smiling those terrible smiles. The Crown is taking the hive, Savra gasped, still supported between Zeta 9 and me. Not slowly anymore. Rapidly, exponentially. Every person who sees the symbol, who hears the promises, becomes part of it. Nodes in a network, fingers on a hand. Whose hand? I demanded. Yours, Kaelen. The Crown is preparing the hive for you. When the fragments reunite, when you wear the complete crown, all of these people will be yours to command. An army of the faithful, ready to spread your dominion across the stars. I would never. Wouldn't you? She looked at me with knowing eyes. Haven't you already imagined it? The power to reshape the Imperium according to your vision, to correct every injustice, punish every corruption, enforce true order across the galaxy. The Crown isn't offering you evil, Inquisitor. It's offering you exactly what you've always wanted, the authority to make things right. I wanted to deny it, but she was speaking truths I'd barely admitted to myself. How many times had I looked at the Imperium's bureaucracy, its waste and inefficiency and casual cruelty, and wished for the power to change it? How many times had I seen injustice and known that if only I had more authority, more reach, more dominion, I could prevent it? The Crown understood me perfectly, and that made it infinitely more dangerous than any daemon. We reached the rendezvous point, an abandoned warehouse in the industrial sector, to find Vex and Jace already waiting. Vex was wounded, a deep gash across his face still bleeding freely. Jace's armor was scorched and dented. They looked like they'd fought through hell. Report, I commanded. The nobles are dead, Vex said flatly. All 17 members of the Planetary Council, plus their families, bodyguards, found them in the council chamber, arranged in a circle around the crown fragment. They had killed each other, fought with knives and bare hands for the right to wear it. The survivor, Lord Governor Thassus, wore the fragment for perhaps 30 seconds before his brain hemorrhaged. But in those 30 seconds, he paused, face pale. In those 30 seconds, he issued orders. Planetary-wide broadcasts. He commanded the Arbites to stand down, commanded the PDF to lay down arms, and commanded every citizen to prepare for the coming of the Red King, and they obeyed. Everyone with a Vox heard those commands and obeyed. Emperor's throne, I breathed. The entire planet is compromised. Sister Verity arrived minutes later with Gregor, both covered in promethium and blood. Verity's armor was cracked in a dozen places, and Gregor moved with a limp that suggested broken ribs. The manufactorum, she reported grimly. 3,000 workers, all infected by the Crown's influence. They had built a throne from the bodies of their overseers, all welded together with promethium and devotion, and they were waiting, just waiting, for someone to sit upon it. Did you secure the fragment? Yes, but... She hesitated, something like fear crossing her stern face. Inquisitor, they knew. When we arrived, they knew. They called me Sister Verity. They called Gregor by his name, and they said they were preparing the throne for their king, for Kaelen Vross. Everyone turned to look at me. In their eyes, I saw suspicion, fear, and accusation. They were wondering the same thing I was. How much of me was still me? How much had the crown already claimed? "We need to destroy all 3 fragments," I said, forcing confidence into my voice. "Zeta 9, is there a way to destroy them simultaneously? Prevent the pieces from escaping and reforming?" Affirmative. However, simultaneous destruction requires bringing all fragments together. This presents significant risk of reconstitution. Then we'll have to be fast. Set charges, blow them all at once before the crown can react. It was a plan. Not a good plan, but better than nothing. We spent the next hour preparing, setting up a blast chamber in the warehouse's basement, surrounding it with blessed wards and sanctified oils. Zeta 9 positioned the 3 fragments in a triangular formation, each connected to plasma charges that would vaporize them simultaneously. But as we worked, I noticed something. The fragments were moving, slowly, almost imperceptibly, sliding across their platforms toward each other, trying to reunite despite the stasis fields. "They're accelerating," Zeta 9 observed. "The proximity is increasing their attraction. Estimate 15 minutes until the stasis fields fail." "Then we detonate in 10, I decided. We evacuated the basement, taking positions behind reinforced barricades. Zeta 9 began the countdown, his Vox synthesizer marking each second with mechanical precision. 10 minutes, 9, 8. At 7 minutes, the warehouse doors exploded inward. Matthias Krell stood in the opening, his crown of bone and wire still fused to his skull, weeping blood. Behind him, hundreds of cultists filled the street, and behind them, thousands more. An entire hive sector's worth of corrupted souls, all come to prevent us from destroying their god. "You cannot stop what has already begun, Inquisitor," Matthias said, his voice carrying impossible distance. "The crown is inevitable. Your resistance is admirable but futile. The throne awaits. The king must be crowned." 6 minutes. 5. "Hold them!" I roared, opening fire with my bolt pistol. My retinue answered with a storm of lasfire and bolter rounds, cutting down the first wave of cultists. But there were so many. For every one we killed, 3 more pushed forward, heedless of casualties, driven by faith in their cursed god. 4 minutes, 3. They were going to reach the basement. They were going to stop the detonation. And then the fragments would reunite, and the crown would be whole, and... Savra grabbed my arm, her grip desperate. "Kaelen, listen to me. There's another way. The crown wants you, yes, but want is not possession. If you wear it willingly, accept its power fully, you might be able to direct the detonation from within, use its own hunger to destroy it." That's insane. The moment you put it on, you'll have perhaps 5 seconds before it consumes you completely. 5 seconds to trigger the charges. It's a slim chance, but it's better than letting the cultists stop us. 2 minutes. The cultists were on the stairs. Gregor and Jace fought desperately to hold them back, but they were overwhelmed. Sister Verity's bolter was empty, and she had drawn her power sword, carving through corrupted flesh with prayers on her lips. 1 minute. I looked at the countdown timer, looked at my retinue fighting and dying, looked at the basement stairs where I could see the crown fragments beginning to glow brighter, pulsing in sync with my racing heart. And I made my choice. "Emperor, forgive me," I whispered and ran toward the basement. 3 months later, I stood on the bridge of my new vessel, a frigate named the Eternal Vigilance, and watched the stars stream past in the swirling madness of the warp. Vex stood beside me, reviewing reports from our first joint investigation. We made a good team, balancing each other's strengths and weaknesses, checking each other's impulses. But the past never truly left me. I still felt the weight of that phantom crown on my brow sometimes, especially in the moments before sleep. Still saw visions of what I could have been, what I could have commanded. The crown was destroyed, yes, but the desire it had fed upon remained, would always remain. That was the true horror I had learned. Corruption wasn't something that happened to you. It was something that was always inside you, waiting for the right moment to emerge. The crown hadn't corrupted me. It had simply shown me what I was already capable of becoming. And knowing that, living with that knowledge was perhaps the greatest punishment I could have received. "Inquisitor," Vex said, interrupting my thoughts. "We're receiving a distress call from the Hadron system. Reports of a cult worshipping an ancient artifact, claims of mass possessions. They're requesting inquisitorial intervention." I felt my pulse quicken, felt that old familiar excitement at the prospect of a new investigation, and immediately I felt guilt at that excitement. Because part of me, that part that would never die, was eager for another chance to prove myself, to demonstrate my authority, to show that I had learned from my mistakes and could be trusted with power again. The ambition never truly left, the temptation never truly ended. "What kind of artifact?" I asked carefully. "Unknown, but the reports mention something about a throne, and blood, always blood." A chill ran down my spine. It couldn't be. The crown was destroyed. I had felt it unmake itself, had watched Gears dissolve into ash. There was no way it could have survived, unless... "There are 100 relics like it," that voice in the darkness had said, "each offering authority to those who dare claim them. 100 crowns, 100 thrones, 100 opportunities for humanity to destroy itself through its own ambition." And now, apparently, another one had surfaced. "Set course for Hadron," I ordered. "But Danforth, when we arrive, I want you to watch me closely. If I show any signs of corruption, any indication that I'm slipping, I want you to stop me, by any means necessary. Even if it means killing you, especially if it means killing you. Promise me." He met my eyes, understanding passing between us. "I promise." As the eternal vigilance shifted course, I returned to my quarters and stood in front of the mirror. In the reflection, I saw a man who had faced temptation and survived. A man who understood his own weaknesses. A man who knew that the battle against corruption was never truly won, only fought again and again, one choice at a time. I saw a man wearing an invisible crown, its weight pressing down on him every moment of every day. And I knew that this was my fate now, to bear that weight, to resist that temptation, to make that choice over and over until the day I finally failed or the day I finally died. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war, but the greatest war is not fought on battlefields against Xenos or heretics. It's fought in the human heart, against the darkness within, against the ambition that promises power and delivers only slavery. I had won that war, for now. But the crown, in whatever form it took, whatever name it wore, would always be waiting, patient, eternal, ready to offer its gifts to the next ambitious soul who believed themselves strong enough to resist. And somewhere, in the darkness between stars, something that might have been that ancient voice laughed softly and whispered, "Until next time, Kaelen Vross. Until next time." 5 years have passed since the hunt for the Bloodied crown. 5 years of investigations, of battles, of constant vigilance against the corruption that lurks in every shadow of the Imperium. Vex and I have become legends in certain circles. The Inquisitor duo who faced the crown and survived, who destroyed the scepter, who continued to resist where others fell. But legends are lies we tell ourselves to make the truth bearable. The truth is simpler and more terrible. I resist because I have no choice, because I know what I'm capable of becoming, because I've seen the monster lurking beneath my righteous facade, and I know that the moment I stop fighting, that monster will emerge. The truth is that every single day is a battle. Every decision I make, I question. Every time I give an order, I wonder if it's truly necessary or if it's just my ambition disguised as duty. Every time I pass judgment on another soul, I remember that I am no less fallible, no less corruptible than they are. The crown taught me that, and in its own terrible way, it might have been the most valuable lesson I ever learned. Tonight, I sit in my quarters aboard the Eternal Vigilance, reviewing reports from our latest investigation. Another cult destroyed, another threat neutralized, another day where I managed not to become what I fear most. Tomorrow, we depart for a new assignment. Vex has informed me that there are reports of an artifact on the frontier worlds, something called the Chalice of Dominion. Ancient, powerful, corrupting. I should be afraid. I should request another Inquisitor to take this mission. But I won't, because I understand now what that voice in the darkness meant. This is my curse, not to be corrupted, but to be forever vigilant against corruption. Not to fall, but to stand at the edge of the abyss every day and choose not to jump, not to claim the crown, but to bear its weight without ever wearing it. And perhaps in the end, that is enough. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. But some of us fight our wars alone, in silence, against enemies no one else can see. We are the watchers who watch themselves, the judges who know they deserve judgment, the guardians who guard against their own darkness. We are the Inquisition's last line of defense, not against external threats, but against the corruption that lives in every human heart. We are the ones who touched the crown and survived, and we will carry that weight until the day we die. The hunt for the bloodied crown is ended, but the story of Kaelen Vross continues, somewhere in the darkness between stars, fighting battles no one will ever know about, resisting temptations no one else can see. Because in the Imperium of Man, there are no happy endings. There is only duty, sacrifice, and the eternal struggle against the darkness without and within. The Crown of Veylor is destroyed, but across the galaxy, other crowns await. Other thrones sit empty, waiting for the ambitious to claim them. Other relics whisper their promises to those brave or foolish enough to listen. And when they surface, when they call, when they tempt, someone must be ready to resist. Someone must be willing to say no. Someone must bear the weight of the bloodied crown without ever wearing it. If you want to hear more stories from the grim darkness of the far future, tales of corruption and resistance, of temptation and sacrifice, of the eternal war against the darkness within, then subscribe to this channel. Hit that notification bell, because the Imperium's horrors never sleep, and neither do the stories they spawn. For every crown taken, another waits, heavy with blood. For every throne claimed, another sits empty, hungry for a king. For every battle won, another begins in the shadows. Stay vigilant, stay faithful, and remember, the greatest enemy you will ever face is the one staring back at you from the mirror. The Emperor protects, but sometimes we must protect ourselves from our own desires. This has been the tale of the bloodied crown. Thank you for listening. Now go forth and remain uncorrupted if you can.